I need some traction.
Hey, Traction fam, super excited to hang out with Derek here, co-founder and CEO of DexCare. They're revolutionizing healthcare access, and DexCare has raised 146 million, including a recent 75 million Series C during probably one of the most challenging fundraising climates in health tech. Derek is a serial entrepreneur with successful exits, including CSATs acquired by Jay, and he's played key roles in national healthcare data sharing efforts. So we're going to dive into Derek's entrepreneurial journey. How did he do it? How is he scaling a healthcare product through fundraising and launching in different states during some of the toughest fundraising times? So we're going to get into all of this. Derek, thank you so much for joining us. We seem to have a lot of people in common, and you're in Seattle. Our conference is in Vancouver every time. So I'm bummed we haven't met, but better late than never, and I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, people are getting back together in person these days, so maybe we will, Lloyd. Thanks for having me today. Very glad to be here and have a chat with you.
Awesome. Well, I want to get right into your story. How did you get into entrepreneurship? What is your backstory, and what led you to DexCare, but you did CSATs before that? Tell us all about it.
Yeah. So I started my career as an investment banker, and probably in some ways the least entrepreneurial world you can imagine. I was a finance nerd and got my stockbroker's license before I graduated college, and was just into that kind of stuff. But it's not really an entrepreneurial space because it's actually an incredibly efficient space because they figure out how to work with lots of entrepreneurs and other companies and not have to take a ton of risk in order to get crumbs of risk, crumbs of reward along the way. And so it was an odd way. But what I realized was as I got into that space, pretty early on, I was able to get connected with the work on deal teams with other companies. And the organization I was part of, it was a large regional that even had some international presence. So we were doing larger deals, and I was able to at a very young age, get connected to public offerings and large private placements and some M&A that we were doing on behalf of other clients. And what I discovered through that process, Lloyd, was I was always super excited when we were building the deal and selling the deal and spending time with the CEOs and CFOs of these companies. And then just bummed when the deal was over. And as a consultant, bankers are consultants, basically, you leave and move on to the next one. And I wanted to still be there and hang out with the operators. And so then there's a flight path, a way to do that in the finance space called institutional research, where you get a coverage list. And I started doing that. And I got to spend more time with CEOs and CFOs because I had to provide recommendations to our institutional sales team and so forth and trading teams. But that wasn't enough. And eventually I just said, heck with it, I'm gonna just get into the space. And that was 1996 when I decided to do that. So the internet, I had a coverage list of internet companies in my research world. But at that time, internet meant like telecoms, basically, and people that were ISPs and stuff like that. But I knew a little bit about the space, and I pulled a small group of people I was working with out of that bank and just started building things. Started building it. The quick history is I've been building companies now for a couple decades, 2.5 decades or so. And the first half has been, I would say, roughly social networking, e-commerce, a kind of ad tech, martech space, so the monetization side of that. And then the second half, the more recent half, has been a few companies I've built in the healthcare space that I'm happy to talk about all of them. But I guess the fundamental thing was what really, and I think this drives all entrepreneurs, what really excited me was the ability, and you're an entrepreneur, I mean, you probably appreciate this too, was that it's like you're searching around and you find a fishing hole somewhere and no one else has got the fishing hole. And that's a problem. That's a problem space to be dealt with. And nobody else is in the pond. It doesn't even matter how big the pond is there. The point is nobody else is there and you've discovered it. And so you get a chance to work on it. And I wanted to be the one working on it. I wanted to be the one working on those problems and in those different spaces over the years. And there's a lot of challenges with being an entrepreneur, but I think you're just wired a certain way to want to lean into those challenges if you're that kind of person. And I just discovered I was. I didn't know it growing up because I thought I wanted to be a banker and be on Wall Street and do all that kind of stuff. But I discovered that about myself in the process.
What's really interesting about what you said is when I graduated engineering, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And although I studied engineering, I took my first job in cold calling for a startup because nobody would give me a job. And startups were very rare at our time when I graduated, and my parents were losing it. They're like, your friends are working at Microsoft and Johnson, and you forget about doing engineering. You're cold calling. And what I realized is one of the key things you need to put yourself through if you want to ever be a startup founder is to go and work for founders and scale in different ways. And that job of cold calling led me to then product, because early startups don't have product market fit. So you're talking to customers, you're getting their pain points, you're translating it to developers. And I got stretched in multiple ways. And after doing 2 or 3 of those instances and working for venture-backed companies that were having a hard time, I'm like, I may as well take the risk. And so that's a key theme, is you spend enough time with entrepreneurs and then you went at it yourself. That sort of environment, I think, dictates a lot of what you become or what you do, right? You become the average of the people you surround yourself with.
Yeah. And then I think just to play off that, so one is just getting in and doing it. And then the other is then sticking with it long enough that I fundamentally believe that, half of, if you look at what makes people successful, I think a quarter of it is the talent, right? But a quarter of it's just showing up, a quarter of it's sticking with it and persevering, and a quarter of it's luck. And so you got 3/4 of it that are usually not the things that people tend to focus on. But if you stick with it and just and put yourself in an environment where you're going to learn, like smart people you're gonna swing enough that you're gonna find something that sticks, and then you're just gonna run with it. Now, there's a whole other set of problems that happen once you start scaling and stuff that I think we'll get into later today based on some of your questions. But that just getting going and doing that first startup, finding that first customer, doing those things, it's pretty like common sense stuff you have to use. Like you mentioned, spend time with potential buyers and customers and just learn what somebody wants. At that stage, you're not trying to get product market fit. You're just trying to find, it's not even a market. Is there like one person who will find enough value in what I'm doing to like spend more time with me and maybe give me some money? And then can I like build on that along the way? And so putting yourself in that environment is the showing up piece, and sticking with it is the other piece. You get a little luck on your side as well. Then we all know founders, right, of companies that they're not rocket scientists, right? But they're incredibly successful, and because they've done those other things.
Consistency is the secret ingredient that turns small actions into big outcomes. And a lot of people just jump around. And I think it has a lot to do with how we're educated and go through the educated system and the parenting, right? We're always rewarded and reprimanded growing up based on the results and not on the process, right? Oh, what are your scores? What are your grades? What are your scores? And everything in the real life comes from being consistent and sticking with it. Like luck and risk are 2 sides of the same coin. People who get lucky are the ones who just stick with it and keep taking risks. And as kids, I don't think, at least our generation, isn't primed to stick with it. We're looking at results and then like, how do you jump from one thing to the next thing to the next thing on this promotion? But if you just stuck with it long enough, the markets change, right? Even if you see, we went from the technological shift of on-prem to cloud, and then now a massive technological shift with AI. And some businesses, as a function of just sticking with it and not abandoning it, have the opportunity to get massive market share because they were sitting on a massive customer base. Maybe their retention was low, or maybe their gross margin was super low. But now with AI, they just have this compounding effect, and a lot of people just devalue sticking with it. And maybe that's our Silicon Valley venture culture of just move on. Sometimes you get rewarded for just sticking with it. So tell me about this family health crisis that led into your personal mission into healthcare.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I had been building companies for 10 or 15 years, and in a space I really liked. You talk about AI and Gen AI in particular, things that are being done there now. These are things that have been around for a long time in ad tech, martech spaces. So it was very exciting, but I wanted to connect with something that had the bigger purpose. I wanted to, do well and do good at the same time, is the way it's discussed. And I had a period of a couple of years that I was doing finance. I was doing microcredit work. It's called. It's kind of small loans to people in developing countries, and the business we had there. We got to the point where we had about 10 million borrowers, and mostly in Southeast Asia, mostly in different states in India. And I was all keyed up to go and build a business in India. Had a good network there, still do, and we're going to build a credit bureau there for these borrowers. And around that time, my daughter, who was just a year and a half old at the time, and we talked earlier, traveling a bunch. I was traveling a lot away from my family then, got sick with an illness that we never quite got to the bottom of it. But long story short, it ended up ravaging her body and taking out her kidneys. And that was pretty traumatic for everybody, herself and the family, all of us at the time. And then we had to go through a process for a few years that involved dialysis and kind of managing through this disease to get her to a transplant when she was 3 and 17 years old now, doing incredibly well. But it opened my eyes to healthcare. We're all consumers of healthcare, but then there's like next level consumption of healthcare that you hope you don't ever have to go through. But we did, and I was fortunate enough by then. I had a couple of exits, so my wife and I were able just to shut down any other things we were doing, focus 100% on my daughter's care. Once got out of that, got it stabilized and on the right path, then I did what every technology entrepreneur does, which is you see a bunch of problems and some white space, you just figure, oh, I'll just go in and apply some technology to it and teach all these guys how to actually do this right, and which was a pretty rude awakening. But it did put me, it was another kind of like I mentioned earlier, I hit a fork in the road early in my career when I decided I wanted to be an operator versus a supporter of organizations, which moved me from finance to building businesses. And then this was another fork in the road, right? To where everything just connected to, I could do well, I could do good at the same time. We all consume healthcare. It's depending on which segment you include in it, it's the third up to the number one largest industry in the country, if you include all the segments with farm and everything else. So massive impact. As an entrepreneur, I mentioned earlier, I think one of the diseases that we have as entrepreneurs is that we tend to gravitate towards hard problems that people say can't be fixed and solved. And healthcare, we may get into it, it's ripe with problems even to this day. And then ultimately, too, it connected. Maybe I need to add a fifth slice to my pie I was showing earlier, make them all 20%. There's a purpose, right? That you can connect to it as well. And so I've always been able, and I think good entrepreneurs do this, I've always been able to visualize what something can become versus what it is. And when you're dealing with a loved one in a health situation or a traumatic situation, like that's the whole game, right? You literally need to envision where I'm at right now really sucks. And so we got to get to this other place. You have to envision this other future because, in this case, it was life and death. And so it just really aligned with, wow, I can do all those things I mentioned earlier, plus tie it to a passion where success is literally going to be, can I realize that future that I want my daughter to be able to benefit from? And every business, I've done 3 now in the health space. Every business I've done in that space, the first one they've all been AI businesses. The first one was in the research space and an NLP company. The next one was in the video-based analysis space and the surgery space that we sold to J&J. And then DexCare, we'll talk about, is in the healthcare access space and navigation space. Every one of them, I've been able to backtrack the things that we're doing, the products we're launching, the places we're in market to, this is how my kid and all those around me and myself are going to get healthier as a result of it, like a literal connection. And it's not all businesses are that way, right? That's something special when you can find something where you can, it's not just dog fooding it, right? It's I'm going to be successful or not as a person, or my family is going to be successful or not, depending on whether or not I'm successful in doing the things we got to do as entrepreneurs, finding product market fit and building a sustainable business and raising capital and doing all that stuff. It adds a lot of pressure to it, but it's super motivating. Like it's really, I never leave work in any of these businesses. I never leave the day thinking what we did wasn't worth it, even if it was whatever, doing a performance review for somebody, because I can always then connect it back to, yeah, but we did that because now that person's motivated and they're going to build this product and I'm going to get it out there and my kid's going to benefit from it. So healthcare just turned out to be a really direct connect with my life and my passions. And so now all the work I do for-profit and nonprofit is all healthcare related. And I don't know how much of the problems we'll solve when I'm finally done doing this stuff, but I know that in the very kind of real sense of the people I interact with and the people that are my family and the relationships I have to have a direct connect and benefit from it. And that's just super exciting and motivating.
It's important to have a purpose that's so large and so impactful that the sheer pursuit of it makes you successful. And that purpose is never ending, right? Having a giant, impactful purpose like that doesn't end with you. It carries on, it's generational. And if you look at some of the iconic, most generational companies, they're built on purposes like that, and that's why they carry on forever and ever. So tell us more about DexCare and how are you guys solving healthcare access?
Yeah. So what I really like about DexCare is we're focused on, I already mentioned, biggest industry, biggest market, depending on how you look at it in the country and also the world, depending on how you look at it. And we're focused on the most impactful part of that, which is access, right? And by definition, none of us get healthcare without accessing it. It's like a literal interpretation of it. And so what we're focused on is making it easier and better for everyone. And we all have stories. I'm sure you do. We all do have stories of how long it took to see a doctor, how long we had to wait, whether or not we were able to get access to a certain type of care, whether or not we could pay for it, whether or not it was too expensive, whether or not I even knew what I was paying for it in the first place. All of these things limit all of these. There's so many things that limit someone's access to care that it's a really appealing problem to try to address. That's the good news. The bad news is it's a really complicated problem to try to address because if you just think about the rate limiters for accessing care, it's not, a lot of it is health related, right? What are the conditions I have and my medical situation, et cetera. But a lot of it's also not like healthcare, like what people would think is healthcare related. It's, do I live in a place where I can't even get to somebody? Can I afford to pay for it? All of these kinds of things that impact people in different ways. And so what we're doing at DexCare is we're trying to make that easier and better for people. And our vision is that nobody ever has to wait for care again. And the way we do it in a nutshell is this is another AI company. We've built an organization and a platform that we bring to market that ingests data about three constituencies that are all important players in healthcare access: the patient, the provider, and increasingly the provider is not just a human, it can be a bot as well. And then the institution, right? Because there's certain things for the foreseeable future. If you need surgery, average person needs 7 surgeries in a lifetime, you're probably still going into a OR to get surgery done. And so all of those three constituencies have different things going on in their life and different things that are important to them, different objectives. And so we're very good at aggregating all the intent and motivation and data about those three constituencies, and then putting it into a data-driven intelligence engine that comes up with the right match. And so an example, Lloyd, would be if I've got a condition or something bothering me, and it's pretty low acuity and it's pretty easy to manage, but I still want to see somebody about it. It's bothering me, it's hurting me or whatever. I may not need to go into a physical office with an expensive doctor to see that person. As a matter of fact, the institution may not want that either because that's costly and they probably don't make much money on that visit. So that may be the right way to solve that, may be through navigating me to matching me up with a virtual visit. If it's synchronous, it's handled with a nurse practitioner. If it's async, it's handled by somebody in the background, or it's done in a self-managed, AI first way. That lowers the cost of delivering care for everybody in the health system. I get care faster because I can do it virtually as a result of that. And I'm also balancing load across the network so that I'm saving that MD in the clinic for somebody that actually needs to see the MD in the clinic. And so a lot of what we do for the health systems we work with around the country, they are fiduciary, they're who pay us, and then their providers and their patients are the ones that are the users in the system. A lot of what we do is essentially balancing load across their network so they can see more. And the upshot of it is we found that if it's probably not a surprise, if you understand what's going on with patients well enough, not just what their clinical needs are, but their other needs and what their intent and motivation is, what they want. And then you understand what's going on with providers, whether or not they're at capacity or over capacity or even available or not, or who they can see somebody faster than others, who they're the most efficient at, et cetera. And then you understand what the health system is trying to accomplish as well. Maybe they're trying to drive growth to this location versus that or whatever. If you understand all of that, it's like defragging a disk back in the old days. You can actually find space, find capacity in between, because it's not being efficiently managed and utilized right now. And once we defrag that disk and get people routed in the right way, it opens up space and more people get seen. So with the health systems we work with around the country, we cover about 20% of the US population now with our through our partners. They're on average, people are getting in what was about 28% faster into seeing a provider, getting their care met to one of these modes. The other day I just saw they updated 40% faster than organizations not using DexCare. And that, at the end of the day, our vision is that nobody ever has to wait for care. And I don't know what will solve it, but we're chipping away at it.
That's a generational purpose here. It doesn't get solved, and you can keep working at it. You've been through a couple exits, and what I find as I talk to more and more entrepreneurs, especially second, third time entrepreneurs, is after the first couple million, your lifestyle doesn't significantly change. And what drives you is this giant purpose. And what causes burnout is all the sort of messing around and the grunt work that takes you away from the purpose, right? All the effery that takes you away from the purpose. Now you raised significant amount of money, 146 million, in an industry that's notorious for long sales cycles and regulatory headaches. What are some must-have conditions that enable that kind of fundraising success? Specifically, your 75 million Series C came in 2023. Right? So many health startups were struggling. So some key things maybe you can recommend. Perhaps, how did you raise your first round of capital? And then what were the things that drove subsequent rounds, particularly the 75 million Series C?
Yeah, good question. And as we talked about a little bit good starting, there's a couple different, you can bootstrap companies, you can get it outside capital. I think there's costs and benefits to both of them. I've typically been in the mindset of let's leverage somebody else's money to do this because that's allowed us to scale more. And so all the companies I've done have been institutionally venture backed. It's not right or wrong. It's just a way of doing it. And we knew that, again, healthcare access is the most important part, the tip of the spear for the biggest industry in the country that impacts every single person in the country. So it's not for the faint heart. I guess we're not building rockets, right? That is more capital intensive, but it's going to take some money to do this. What I've found is that this helped with DexCare and most of my companies is that you want to, whenever you're embarking on something like that, you want to find an unfair advantage, right? Lloyd, it's hard building any business. You had to build a business, get to 10 million ARR. I'm sure the stats, that's not even the 1%. That's like the 0.1% that does that. And so it is hard to do this stuff. And I'm always looking for an unfair advantage. And where do I get those? I definitely don't need to be the smartest person in the room. Most of my companies, DexCare included, the original idea came from other people before I got involved, or people I was working with. And then my superpower is the ability to see where it can go and then to get resources together to actually scale it. So we spun DexCare out of Providence Health System, which is a $28 billion health system in the western part of the country, about 51 hospitals. I don't know how many tens of thousands of employees they have, but it's big. It's a $28 billion organization. And so they were working on these access challenges within their 7-state area, and all these challenges people have getting patients. And so the unfair advantage we had was that we were able to build something and have it into production in real life at scale before we even made a company around it. It's a project inside of an organization. But I want to be clear, in my experience, there's always an unfair advantage that can be found. You just have to turn over the rocks to look at it. My last company, we spun out of the University of Washington, and I got, by serendipity, I got connected to one of the leading surgeons there, and he had an awesome idea for using AI to analyze surgical videos and make surgeons better. And we spun a company out of that and built it and sold it to J&J. And there's always a way to find an unfair advantage. In this case, it was first customer would be coveted by anybody into production. We could validate it, fix it, make it work, publish on it, so that day one we went out to raise money and sell it to other people, we could show what this marquee client was already doing with it. That's one. The second thing is I've always been, it probably all comes from my banking days. There's lots of, the cliche is that there's lots of hobbies out there, and there's businesses, the differences is there a market. And so to piggyback on what we were talking about earlier, while I do advise if you want to be an entrepreneur, like you just got to, as we were saying, you got to get in the markets, get in, roll up your sleeves, talk to them. Don't even worry about making money. Just like figure out, does anybody even care about this? At some point, if you're successful, you'll get to the point where you do have to say, all right, now I care. Are there enough people out there that'll pay me for this, that there's actually a market? Does my product get the product market fit? And can I ride that curve? And that's the other place where I've just found the way you can be successful is making sure that irrespective of what the business is and the outward persona, like it needs to drive hard dollar ROI for whoever your fiduciary is. So when I did a business years ago called classmates.com, it was a pretty friendly persona. It was we'll hook you up with people from your past and you'll do an online reunion together. That was the value prop to the user, right? But we did it day one with an arbitrage business model in the back end that said, all right, we could essentially aggregate consumers for $1 and we could monetize them for $2, right? Through understanding who they needed to be connected with. And we put a model around that. So having hard dollar ROI matters. And in healthcare, where it's really hard to actually make it work because as you mentioned, the regulations and particularly like we sell the health systems, they're not very good businesses. They're 2 to 5% operating margins at best. They're people intensive. It's got to pay for itself. And then you could get you traction. And then I would say so unfair advantage of making sure you're always thinking about the true value you're delivering to customers that needs to be quantified. It's just money's the way people keep score. Like this is the way our society works, like it or not. And so you got to be thinking about that from once you're moving forward on this. And then the final I would say is just, it actually comes back to the capital and dovetails into your second part of your question. I've just always found that to do things at scale, just the way I'm wired, I tend to lean into, all right, the way to do this is I'm going to get the best people that know more about this than I do in each of these areas that are just pro executors in this particular way. And I've been fortunate enough now, having done 6 of these, that now when I do this, I have a team I bring into these things that helps. And part of that is funding as well. I've been fortunate I added it up the other day for another one of these. I've had 32 different institutional investors invest in my companies over the years. There's angels and stuff too, but those are the institutions. And it's been really helpful, right? It's hard to go into, like, our largest partner is Kaiser Permanente. They're a $105 billion organization, largest health system in the country. It's hard to go in that organization without being able, who's going to pay you tens of millions of dollars in contract values, to then not be able to show up with the gravitas that allows you to say, we're going to go at this as big and as sophisticated and professional as we possibly can. It just, this space demands that. And it is life and death for people at the end of the day. Cost gets worked into this to just make sure that you're managing risk in the process as well, that you wouldn't have in other industries as well. So it gets expensive, I guess, is the point. And so that's why we raised the money. And to finalize it, your question about the timing of it and so forth, we've been very fortunate that we did our A when we spun out Providence. We did that A in 2020. And yeah, there was telehealth stuff that people were going crazy over, but not a lot of other stuff. And we're not a telehealth company. We have that, but we care about getting somebody the right care that balances that load. But we were able to do that with the advantages we had. And then within that same year, we followed up with a $50 million Series B. And then you mentioned the Series C in 23. And yeah, it's by the time 23 came around, people had the hangover from digital health. And the advice most people were given was, nobody wants to be raising right now because it's going to be bad. We, though, because of things I mentioned, because of the traction we had with leading health systems, the growth we had in the organization, the hard dollar ROI, we could prove it. And then the progress we were making towards delivering on our purpose and our mission as well. All those things came together where we were able to then do a deal in a market that was tough and actually double the valuation in that market as well. And part of that is, maybe I'll end on saying, if you can build in my experience, and I've had a few of these, not everyone has worked out this way, by the way, but I've had a few of these where if you can get those stars to align, the kind of things that I'm mentioning, and actually be at a point where now maybe it is a depressed time in the market, but you've got those points of value. There's smart money out there. They'll look at that and they'll say, all right, we need to be choosy about where we're going to invest. This is one of those companies. And now you're actually, as a company, very differentiated relative to all the other ones out there. So we were able to take advantage of the demand supply imbalance as well for the time we raised the money as well. And we've gotten, I love our investors. We have Iconic Capital, or kind of their growth fund and transformation. We have 6 health systems that have invested as well. Defined Ventures. These are leading investors in our space, and Iconic's a leading investor in the technology space. We've been very fortunate on that front.
A lot of startups come and go, right? And I think, and they ride the wave of these new hype cycles. And when you have, for no pun intended, street cred, and you're coming from that social proof, like I've built successes, people have invested in me and received great return. I'm bringing the same crew that helped me build successes. I think that speaks volumes to, one, your consistency and longevity in the space. And also, when you see a founder that has this community, this circle of investors, customers, and team members aligning with, and this person doesn't need money. That's a very dangerous combination, right? You're on this big purpose. And that's what I think the key lesson here for startup founders is: don't just gravitate towards raising money. Build a product that solves a problem towards a greater purpose, get some customer validation, and get some street cred, get some testimonials, really build something that people want to use and pay for over and over again. And that doesn't have to be millions of dollars in revenue, but that could be like 3 to 5 paying customers that you are a must have for, not a need to have or a nice to have. You're a 10x sort of, you're a 10x, you're a 10x force multiple. You're a 10x, you're not a vitamin. You're like mission critical to them running their business, and they can see that value. And fundraising becomes very easy when you have that sort of validation. Through your journey, though, any sort of unconventional fundraising advice you'd give founders today?
Unconventional. I probably the thing that's worked most for me that I don't think enough people take advantage of is aligning before you're even trying to raise money with the people that are going to make you, even if you're the CEO, are going to make you look that much better. So I've only done one business that I didn't spin out of something else, and that was the one that didn't work. and so the other 5 that worked, that all 4 exits, and hopefully DexCare will at some point, they all came from me doing an EIR program inside of a venture fund for 6 months, six or 12 months. And irrespective of one's opinion on VCs, the one thing is true: they see a lot of stuff, right? They see tons and tons of stuff. So it's like this. You just see this constant kind of flow of ideas and things, and just gets you thinking. And then at some point, somebody shows up that really knows their stuff. And then you're like, how can I attach myself to that person and do something together? When I spun the company out of the University of Washington, it was, first of all, it was super fun. I spent a year kicking around campus there in a formal commercialization program they had there. And just every day meeting with 3 to 5 professors in various departments in there. I was working with the computer science department and design, and then the health system, who were like just figuring out stuff and creating IP, right? And 95% of it were science projects, but you do enough of it, turn enough of those rocks over, and you stumble on things, like I did with the urologist surgeon I ended up doing a company with. And he knew that space so well. And so whether it's the funding source themselves, like the venture fund, or the university campus, or doing, I guess the Providence thing would be more like a corp dev kind of thing. What's common across all those is that, like, you don't need it. It's almost like, get over any hubris you have about. I see entrepreneurs at times they're like, it's got to be my idea, it's got to be my thing, and I'm so committed. And I love conviction to a vision and so forth, but don't be so narrow-minded, right? That it's your way or the highway, because there's just a lot of really smart, talented people in the world that are working on really cool stuff. And the best fundraising advice I've ever, direct or indirect, is attach yourself. Like, feels where you started, Lloyd, in this conversation. Like, just get in and do it and attach yourself to those people. And I know, I guess the other thing I'll say is, I know people, particularly like early on, first time entrepreneurs, can say, yeah, but you're already connected to VCs, like can get in them or whatever. It doesn't take a big track record to go hang out on a college campus with a bunch of professors that are probably know an ounce of business stuff, that basically, irrespective of where you're at. It doesn't take some special privilege to be able to go and just be in like the startup community, like you're in, Lloyd, and like we're in, where we just know all of these other people that are around it. Just surround yourselves, and like the funding then comes. And that's probably the thing to end on. I'd say final on funding is, put yourself in the position where you'll be connected to the smart people, ideally capital sources that are doing those things. I agree with you. Bring in the capital when you need it, which means you've got a little bit of traction. You've got some customers. Again, our first 21 we raised in DexCare, even though we didn't even have a company, we had a giant health system that was using it with a big contract there, right? So get that. But then once you've done that, then the easiest way to raise money, it sounds like trite to say it, but the easiest way to raise money is have a good business idea that's got a little bit of traction and has super smart people working on it, and the money will be there. And usually when the money's not there, it's not because, I know markets move and all that kind of stuff, but when the money's not there, if you're trying to raise it, it's because you're missing one of those things. Like, you don't have any traction. You don't have an idea that's that novel. You don't really have the best people connected to it. So you got to do that. And then those other things are there. They'll be there.
I like what you said about alignment, right? Team alignment, in that early sort of core, or I call it your first few pirates, right? Building a high growth startup is very much aligning a bunch of pirates and romantics, or rather rebels and missionaries. They want to do things differently,
Yeah.
but they're also missionary or romantic to that idea. That alignment is everything, because if there's misalignment, it's done. Now, how did you land your first big customer? And then how did you scale that to 50 states?
Yeah. So I've talked about the Providence one enough, so I won't do that. I probably the best one to chat about. I mean, let me back up. So Kaiser, I've mentioned that too. It's very big. Our first big non-Providence customer is an organization we love working with. We do all sorts of publishing and media with them. So a system in Indiana called Community Health Network. CHN, they serve the full state of Indiana, all forms of care. So they're a big deal in Indiana. And what I love about them is they're incredibly progressive. Dr. Patrick Gill is our sponsor there and runs the technology and strategy side of the organization there. And they're just incredibly progressive organization that wants to do the things that others haven't done, which is pretty cool for a health system just confined to one Midwestern state. The way we got connected, the way it happened was obviously having the unfair advantage of Providence opened up some doors, but it was really, it's funny how this conversation is going. It just comes back to just, it sounds trite to say, but just putting ourselves in the situation to be able to have the conversation with them. It sounds not particularly insightful, but it really was that. It was getting to finding Dr. McGill and his crew. There's lots of conferences that people go to with digital health and all sorts of those things. And then it just came back to the basics, right? A lot of the stuff is not hard from a common sense side. What do we got? What's the value it's driving? Do we have any proof points? Hey, here's some really smart people that are involved in this thing. And then the final ingredient, obviously, is having a willingness on the other side of the customer to be able to then run with it. And now we've expanded our relationship with them 2x at this point, where we're in our fifth. Well, we've been working with them since I think we probably negotiated the first contract before we even spun out of Providence. We couldn't do it because we didn't have a company yet, but we're very deeply embedded with them at this point and doing really cool stuff. We're not just providing access for people that are looking for urgent care and primary care and things like that. We do that, but we're helping reduce the disparity in access for breast, colon, and lung cancer screenings in the state of Indiana, which is, only, by our estimates, only about half the people that should be getting screened are actually getting screened. And we're closing that gap with them. And that's back to that will save lives. And that's a big driver. And that's how it came. And then once we got that going, then snowball effect, you start to earn the right to win when you've got the right logos and stuff there.
And your GTM motion, is it like sales, knocking on doors? Like what
Yeah.
is
So in healthcare, I don't know how this is probably more of a enterprise motion, I would say, but there's 100 people we got to talk to. Only one of them can buy it. The other 99 are there to kill it or find a way to kill it. They're long sales cycles. 6 months is fast for us. 9 to 12 is more normal. But the ACVs
are massive?
They more than pay for themselves.
What are the ACVs in your business? Is it millions or is it hundreds of thousands?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Our contracts are millions of dollars a year in ARR and multi-year contracts and about 3-year contracts. And so it is we have a large direct sales force. It's very relationship driven. You still got to have the data at the end of the day. I've done other businesses and so it's a unified funnel, right? We've got marketing, customer success, and commercial. The sales side of the organization are all coordinated, right? So we've got a funnel that we work through as marketing has their motions to drive qualified leads and so forth to get into our stages of our funnel that then commercial runs with. We have funnels that go through S1s all the way to S6 when we get it. And then CX picks up after that and is managing the accounts and implementing them, getting data in the process that they then feed back into the marketing engine to then promote those results, which we then use to win more business. And so that's a key piece of it. Other businesses I've done though, I contrast that quickly with Classmates when we did, that was 100% commercial or 100% consumer. We had no sales force. We had an advertising business, so they're selling ads, but most of the business came from subscriptions. It was so that business to go to market motion were marketing, and it was all digital ROI based marketing, so we could spend $1, get 2, and then a really big support team of hundreds of people fielding calls for people that were calling in to get tech support on stuff. Like that was the way that would then spread the news about DexCare, about Classmates virally. So it just depends on the market, the kind of business you have, enterprise or consumer.
What's interesting is here, a lot of founders, I feel, don't pick markets the right way. They think, okay, I have this market and then I have this solution. They get stuck on the solution. But I think picking your ICP is so key, right? Like you picked a large growing market, but sometimes picking a market that's regulated, that's not easily accessible to everyone else out there, helps you build stronger moats. Because now you did the hard part is
right.
You sold to a market that's so regulated and that's hard to break through, and you build these sales processes. And so you got like this brand moat, you got this GTM moat, and you got a regulatory moat, so to speak. And it's really hard to break businesses like that because nobody, just in healthcare at least, switches multi-year contracts that's mission critical to your business. This dovetails right into my next question, right? The world is shifting into AI workforce,
right? And
the models have gotten better and better. And I think I shouldn't say race to the bottom on models, but foundational models. But you got OpenAI and then you got DeepSeek, and the models are going to get better and better, and it's going to get AI is going to get cheaper and cheaper. And if you see these agentic wrappers on top of foundational models, really make human work autonomous, right? And doing human work autonomously is finally possible. And this is something that companies who've been consistently in a space for a long time can leverage to give them a massive exponential gain here. How are you thinking about it?
So just like broadly, the kind of Gen AI world. Yeah. So I'm a believer. I think the atom was split again. It proceeded, as you may know, that we just all saw it in the media in last year, right? But the work that was done with the Bert and Ernie models that Google and others were doing preceded it a few years. It's been a game changer. And so I can confidently say all the businesses I've done have been machine learning and AI businesses where we've leveraged those technologies to discover patterns and insights through the data that you could then use to make better decisions. The thing that's changed, of course, is now we can actually generate the action for it. It actually creates something. I think we all get excited about this bot seems to talk like a human. That's marginally interesting, but I think the really interesting piece is that it can actually take an action for you, right? This AI agent can do the work for you now at this point. And now we're moving to this world where You've got AI agents that can negotiate with each other to get the work of multiple people done at this point. That's one of the things too, super exciting. And the other is that we've now moved in all these businesses I've done in the past, like a big part of our cost was creating the training data. When I did the video-based analysis company, we had troves of people who would like annotate surgical videos and figure out where things were in the interoperative field so that we could train a model to know when you were getting close to a critical structure with the device. Now, with generative AI, the other thing it generates is it generates and synthesizes its own data as well. And we don't have enough time to get into all the potential negative things that can happen as a result of that. But the point is, it's all faster now, right? Whether or not the DeepMind stuff is real or not, I think the more important point is that, of course, the cost of this technology and democratization of this technology is going to happen. Anybody that's bought a TV ever knows that's going to happen. And of course, it's going to happen here as well. And a big part of that is because the models are creating their own data to figure things out themselves much faster. So in our case, we've got the traditional way in DexCare, the traditional way of using AI. So I just mentioned, we ingest all those data sources. We use traditional AI and machine learning to figure out, okay, what's the best combination of patient to provider setting, service line, modality, you name it, in a way that's going to meet everybody's needs and get everybody happy and balance load. So we do that now. And then the generative part is, what action can I now take based on that? The very old way, healthcare, so it still happens today, but the way a lot of things get scheduled today, it just as one example, is like you call the call center and you talk to a person and they say, here's the appointments available, let's schedule it. Or the more modern way is you go online and you see a place to schedule and you do it yourself. The way this is going is to a point where the agent says, look, I really understand what you need, Lloyd, and I'm not going to waste your time like making you call a number. I've scheduled an appointment for you, and you don't take it. You don't have to take it, but you know what? If you want it, and it's a good thing to do, I've taken care of that for you, and all you got to do is show up and do that. So those are the kinds of, I can't devolve too much, but we're very much in the building of the AI agents game now at this point, so that we can just make care more accessible to people and do things for them without them having to do it all themselves. Doesn't commit them to anything, by the way. It just gives them the ability to do those things with higher velocity.
Definitely. You talk about increasing access, right? And increasing bandwidth. My wife actually is an ER physician at Stanford and teaches medicine there. And I've seen even her work where she's not doing scripts anymore, any of that, right? That is transformed in a big way. And I think AI creates more advancement in healthcare than medicine alone will. So excited for these times.
So cool. Yeah.
As we close out here, I wanted to ask you, what was your toughest roadblock in business? Like where it felt like nothing's working, it's all going to break. Every entrepreneur has these moments where it's extreme anxiety, feels like there's no turning back. And it feels like you're going to hit a wall and you're almost going to hit the wall. And then there's something happens and you pass, right? Like the Fast and the Furious moment. Did you have a moment like that?
Oh, sure. Every single company has got those. Every single one. In the interest of time, I get the one that stands out was, so back, I mentioned Classmates years ago when we did that company, and it turned out to be very successful company, very profitable, $100 million plus company. We give good exit, all that stuff. But there was a time where I remember, and this was like late 90s, right? So like we raised $15 million. That was a lot. And the Web 1.0 Web 1.0 had blown up and all this market value was gone. And we took advantage. We were able to essentially buy ads super cheap then and actually grow really economically that way. But there was a time where we pretty much spent all that money. And I remember going into the CFO's office and she had it was almost like a movie, but it was real. She had in her desk drawer like all the bills we were putting in there that we weren't paying because we were on fumes. The money was almost all gone. And I'll never forget, we just happened to have a product session at that same week, and we had this genius marketer there who I eventually co-founded some other things with, and he said, he looked at what we were doing to get consumers into the system. And at the time we were asking them a bunch of questions and as you probably know, that can, screw up your conversion funnel and stuff when you do that. So he said, what if we just inverted this whole thing? And instead we said, hey, we want to get you in this database, but instead of having you tell us what school you went to and all this stuff, we'll have you do a search, and you'll click on a map and you'll do this stuff, and we'll just track what you're putting in there. And then we'll say at the end, hey, do you mind if we put that search you just did, we might mind if we build a profile for you, Floyd, in that system? And most people said, yeah, that's fine. So by them searching for something to find somebody, it actually created the profile of that person, or at least the start of it. And then we were able to monetize those profiles as people would come in and try to find those people. What was amazing was that product change. It changed it overnight, because we were all online subscriptions then. So we could see literally, with 80 million consumers, like we could see by the minute as subscriptions were coming in. We put that change in, and we sat there that night and watched the computer screen, and just it changed the growth trajectory overnight. And we started making money immediately on that. And the thing I took away from it was, and this has gone with me to every the businesses I've done, is even the most successful businesses, they've got an up and to the right chart, and it just looks, the best ones just looks, man, these guys have just always been doing it. It's been awesome. But really what it is if you could zoom in at like the microscopic level on that line, you'd see it's a bunch of tests and things that have happened. And if they're successful, there's been more wins than losses. And then when you zoom out, it's a line. But when you zoom in, it's all over. And that was what happened. Like, we had a bunch of that stuff. And then one night that marketer said, how about we just change this? And it did that. And then when you zoom out, this looks like a line. And that was really humbling and important for me to learn as well, because I guess that's the other thing I've just learned in these businesses is, like, you do all the stuff we've talked about in this last hour or so. And at the same time, you just need to accept that these things are so hard to do, building these companies in any of these industries, not just healthcare, that you've got to have like shots on goals. You have got to have, which is probably why I've been wired to also lean into capital as well. Because to me, capital is it's just more runway. It's more concrete that's being laid out there, because smart people are eventually going to figure it out, and you're going to find that product inversion or whatever. And then you're going to celebrate, and you're going to win. And then you're going to say, all right, we got to find the next one and the next one and the next one. And we got to make that line go up. And so if you don't have those failures or those walls, as you were saying, you'll never, like, the only way to win then is to be right the first time. And nobody's ever right the first time. That's like impossible to do. So you got to keep trying all the little things, and eventually something will hit. So I embrace those things, but you got to have money to live through it. That's the key. If you're out of money, you're done. So
one is money, but the other thing is like mental resilience, right? And I want to end with this.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the emotional roller coaster and the anxiety of these crazy ups and downs, right? Especially in your industry right now, maybe in the early days, like, if you don't fill that pipeline with like lots of deals, you can't ambulance chase at the end of the month, right? For a deal to happen. So it's a lot of family takes a toll. They become collateral damage to the entrepreneurial purpose. How do you deal with all of this, like, emotionally? Like, how do you brace yourself for the marathon? Because as we talked about at the beginning, consistency is key, right? But when you're playing this consistency game, it's hard when you're like speed bump after speed bump, ups, downs. Yeah. What is your practice?
So I've always been able to, well, maybe the first startup I wasn't so good on it, but after that, I've been able to ensure that that I take time purposefully to be with family. And what I've found is that the way you do that is that you think about the days and the hours in the days quite literally, right? So you compartmentalize things, right? So I'm always home for dinner, but I'm probably doing work after dinner, right? And I heard an interview from Bruce Springsteen not long ago, and someone was asking about this, and he said, look, the goal is just to be present, right? So he may be working on a song or something when he's around his family, but at least he's there. And you have to get good at deconstructing the time, if you will, and being thoughtful about it, and not thinking everything is so literal as, this is only valuable to me and my family, if I'm or friends or whatever is important to you, if I'm there at this particular time. You got to start thinking, breaking it up. The perseverance piece and sticking with it. It's the motto I've always had is just to never look down. I think, and there's negatives to this, I'll admit, but I will say from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I think if you get to a point where you start saying, you start letting the fear take hold about what's happening. If we would have that evening when we were looking at the bills piled up in the CFO's desk drawer, if we would have just stopped for a moment and let it sink in what we were looking at, there's a good chance we wouldn't have just stayed later and grinded out a product change. I do believe, and this is not to condone, this is different than like misleading people or anything like that. I don't condone any of that. But I do think as an entrepreneur, you've got to be able to say, I'm so convicted to what I'm doing. I'm not looking down. If I'm climbing this mountain, the minute I look down, I'm going to start second guessing what I'm doing. So I just have to just look up. Like, things are going to happen one way or the other, but I just can't even pay attention to what's happening down below. I have to look up and keep going. And then the chips will fall where they may. I'd want them not work out. But the thing is, you know what? If it's not going to work out, do you want it to not work out where at least you tried to make it work and someone can say, at least he stuck with it and gave it? Or do you want it to have it not work out and say, yeah, it didn't work out. It might have worked out, but it's because Derek gave up on it. That's not good. And you only have so much control over these things, right? And you do everything you can. And the minute you start looking down and second guessing, doesn't mean you shouldn't be adaptable. You should absolutely be adaptable. You should be humble. You should have humility, all those kinds of things as well. But you can do that. You can say, hey, we made a mistake. We're going the wrong way. We have the wrong trajectory. And then you're at a fork in the road where you can say, so am I going to look back and commiserate with all the mistakes I made and all that kind of stuff? Or am I going to say, yeah, so I made a mistake. I can't do anything about it. Like, always, let's just go forward and figure this out. Let's keep one foot in front of the other, keep getting to the summit here. And then even if we fail, at least we failed on the right side of that. And so that's always helped me get through it.
That's amazing. Thank you for the wonderful conversation, Derek, and wishing you great success. Hope you take over the world and provide great access to healthcare. I think beyond America, the whole world needs it. Wishing you great success on your purpose. Have a good one.
Lord. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
I need some traction.